Well, it's 5:30, so why don't we get started? Welcome, everybody. I'm Oscar Sida, the Program Director of the Human Services Program for faculty. With us today, we have Dr. Richard Berman of the Bronx, New York. He's got a BA from Long Island University, his MSW from Hunter College from New York, also an MA at Kent State, and finally his PhD from University of Denver. He served in lots of roles, most recently as adjunct faculty for various universities and colleges. He was a visiting faculty from 2001-2005 at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas Graduate School of Social Work. And from 1977 to 2001, he was served as the executive director of Lapeer County Community Mental Health Center for Michigan. Prior to that, he served as a mental health clinician for several agencies, and I'll let him fill you in on the rest. I brought Dr. Berman in today to give us some wealth of experience, knowledge, and wisdom from his lifetime of service, and also to help inspire you guys on your own journey and to see where that might take you. So I'll leave you to it, Dr. Berman. Welcome.
Thank you, Oscar, and thanks for this opportunity. Students, you need to know that you should know that Oscar was one of my most excellent students. He was always provided A-level papers, and technologically he taught me, because that was my introduction to computer-assisted education. He was always there to turn things on and make things work, as he did now. He's told me a little bit about you, and I think it's remarkable what you're doing. Here in Las Vegas, students work in a resource-rich community. There are libraries or social agencies, every few blocks, and the opportunities to do internships, to learn, to do research is incredible. And many of you don't have that kind of opportunities, and yet you're plugging on. And so you have my greatest respect and esteem for what you're doing. Keep on doing what you're doing. You're going to get there, and you're going to be sitting in a chair like Oscar sitting in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. You'll be doing the same thing. Well, let me tell you a little bit about myself. Oscar has already done that. I was born and raised in the Bronx. My father was an immigrant from Europe, and the community I lived in the Bronx was fairly diverse in terms of different ethnic groups. We lived in a one-bedroom apartment. So how did we do that? Well, my brother slept in a bedroom with my parents in the corner. Maybe that's why they only had two kids. He was the younger brother. And I slept on a pull-out couch in the living room. I was the first on both sides of our family, father's side, mother's side, to get a college education. And once I started, I couldn't stop. Oscar indicated I have 4 degrees, and that's true. You're all interested in human services, and that's fabulous, because human services is probably one of the most versatile professions there are. I mean, you can work with children, you can work with adolescents, you can work with adults, older adults, you can work with married couples, you can work with groups, not just diverse in terms of client groups, but also diverse and versatile in terms of settings. You can work in prisons, you can work in jails, you can work in hospitals, you can work in social agencies, child welfare centers. The list goes on and on and on. And I've worked in many of those different settings, and that's what I'm going to discuss today. And as we go along, I'll tell you what I did in each setting and also what I learned. So hopefully I can pass on some of that to you. Okay, I'm not going to talk about the jobs I had prior to my professional education. Dad was able to put bread on the table and a roof over our heads, but he didn't have enough, he couldn't help us with walk-around money. And teenagers need walk-around money. So I did many jobs as a teenager, including a counter boy, making ice cream sodas and malteds and coffee, and serving sandwiches, and delivering newspapers. And I was also a pin setter. Anybody know what a pin setter is? Oscar, do you know what a pin setter is?
No, I don't think I know what a pin setter is, no.
Okay. When you go bowling now, you have automatic pin setting. But when I was a kid, you didn't. Someone had to sit back there and set up those pins and then get out of the way before the ball came rolling down the lane. So, okay. So let me talk now about the professional jobs I had. The first job was at the Education Alliance. Now, those of you who are taking notes, you might want to write these two words down, unless you've already been exposed to it in your textbooks. Settlement house. Settlement house. Settlement houses were the beginning of social services, one of the beginnings of social services in this community, in the United States. They began in England. Toynbee Hall was the first one. And you may have heard of Hull House in Chicago. What a settlement house was. Well, let me back up a little. As newly arrived immigrants came into this country, academics wrote articles, how they should be assimilated, how they could be acculturated, what their problems are. And they were finally challenged by others who said, look, you're up in your ivy towers talking about what these folks need, and you're just writing papers, you're doing nothing. So they challenged the academics, and the academics settled in the communities, hence the word settlement house. They actually set up offices and residences in the impoverished communities where the newly arrived immigrants were living. And they worked with women to teach them how to sew and how to cook and how to use the types of ovens that we have. Some of them came from dirt floor communities in East Europe, villages. And they taught the men English skills and how to apply for a job. They also taught them how to deal with money. Well, when I began working in the settlement house, much of that was resolved. My job was working with a teenage fighting gang. How do you work with a teenage fighting gang? Well, you gain their trust. How do you gain their trust? By hanging around with them and just offering a listening ear when they have individual problems, family problems, just being there, just the listening ear and helping to intervene when they have these terrible crises. And the goal was to lead them away from a life of crime, which was going to be in the future, to a life of productivity where they could be good citizens. And recently, a few months ago, one of them reached out to me after so many years, several decades, and Morris was his name, and he told me, Dr. Berman, you wouldn't believe what I've been doing. And he was a principal in a school in New York City, and he talked about the other kids as well. Some of them became cops. Unfortunately, a couple of them did end up in a life of crime, but most of them, I think I worked with about 18 of them, and 2 of them fell by the wayside. But I felt badly about that, but I gave it a good try. Okay, so what did I learn there? I remember I said at every job I was going to share with you what I learned. What did I learn at the Education Alliance? Give kids an opportunity. Give kids an opportunity and they will take it. Give kids an opportunity. Give them recreational opportunities. Give them work opportunities. Give them opportunities to earn a buck, and they'll turn around. Give you an example. It was 1967. 1967, New York City suffered a blackout. The entire city, no electricity. I gathered my teenagers together, and they became volunteer traffic cops. The traffic lights weren't working, so they stood on various corners and directed traffic. Some of them also helped elderly folks climb 2 or 3 or 4 levels to their apartment, and high-rise apartments, and walked with them slowly and comfortably until they got there and rested at each landing. So they had an opportunity to do good, and they did do good. The next job was at St. Vincent's Hospital in New York City. That may ring a bell, St. Vincent's Hospital, that name, because that was one of the first hospitals to respond to 9/11. St. Vincent's Hospital is in Greenwich Village, New York City, not very far from the Twin Towers. So St. Vincent's Hospital received many of the injured individuals. I spent a year there. All I did was group work, group therapy. I had 3 inpatient groups and 1 outpatient group. What did I learn there? Remember, a lesson at every job. What I learned there was that Mental illness is an equal opportunity disorder. In my groups, I had executives from Madison Avenue, and I also had housewives from 4 neighborhoods in Brooklyn. It's a equal opportunity disorder, but I also learned that when one member of a family suffers from a mental illness, guess what? You know what I'm going to say. Every member of the family suffers from that mental illness. So it's a systemic problem. I also had a part-time job during this period. Now, I know it's not proper to use this word, but back then the agency was called the Association for Retarded Children, and it was a national organization. In New York City, twice a month, on a Saturday night, I gathered with about 30 young 20 to 30-year-olds, maybe 18 to 30-year-olds, young developmentally disabled adults. And the parents came too. The parents sat in the sideline. It was a large room. What I did there was organize dances and group activities, and we had lots of fun. Lesson learned there, we are social creatures. We all crave social opportunities. We all need an opportunity to spend time with one another. Consider it. Consider this. What is the most drastic, the most severe punishment an individual receives in prison? Solitary confinement. See, we are all social individuals. We need people. People who need people. Hey, wasn't that a song?
Yeah, Barbara Streisand.
There you go. The next job was at the Williamsburg Community Progress Center. This was an agency in Brooklyn. And Williamsburg was an activist agency, community activist.
Dr. Berman, can you explain a little bit what a community activist organization is, just because it's not something we're familiar with anymore?
Well, yes, I will. I certainly will. In Williamsburg, there were three very different community groups. There were African Americans, and there were also newly arrived Puerto Ricans, and there was an interesting group called Hasidic Jews. Hasidic Jews are the most orthodox branch of Judaism. And if you look at them, you say, oh, there goes an Amish person, because they wear all black to their wrist, and all black all the way. And the women, you can't see. The only thing you can see on a woman is a face and a hand, because everything else is shielded. Well, because the community had these three groups that were fearful of one another, didn't want to interact with one another, they received very little city services. The community activist was to join the community together, make them comfortable, make the three groups comfortable with one another. And once they become comfortable with one another, talk to City Hall, advocate in City Hall, lobby in City Hall, and get services that the community deserved and needed. And they did. We had more bus runs, and the buses came more frequently. Trash pickup became a regular thing, not an occasional thing. And community services were offered in the community too. A child welfare agency, satellite was developed in the community. So community activists lobby and push government and push City Hall to get things that they should have and that they need. And I guess community activists today, the most national one would be the Me Too movement, that women are speaking up and want the same equal opportunities and treatment that men get. It's horrible. I'm the father of 2 daughters and 1 son. It's horrible that women don't get the same dollar that men get for the same work. Anyway, so what did I learn there? Easy. You know it. You know what I'm going to say. Together we stand, divided we fall. Also that when you get people who are fearful of one another and get them in a social situation with one another over a period of time, those prejudices will dissipate, and those stereotypes won't work, and people will become comfortable with one another, and that's a positive. Well, now I am in my early 20s, and there was a problem called conscription. Anybody know what that word means? Well, I'll spell it for you, and well, I'm not going to have you look it up. I'll define it. Conscription. Conscription was the draft board. When I was a young man, every Every young man in this country had to serve 2 years for his country. And there was a war going on with Vietnam. So that meant little old Richard here had to put on khakis and go overseas. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to serve my country. I had some friends, 2 friends went to Canada, became Canadian citizens because they didn't want to serve. A lot of other friends did serve. But I felt, no, I'm not going to run to Canada. Everyone has to serve 2 years. I have to serve my 2 years as well. So I did some research. And I came across a branch of the service called the United States Public Health Service. Now, just like the Marines, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, it's another branch. In fact, we wore the Navy uniform. The service is so small that rather than customize their own uniform, they used the uniform of Navy sailors. So I wore a uniform. I had 2.5 stripes on my sleeve, and they sent me to, I had to take lots of tests, physical tests and interviews and written tests. And when I passed all of these, they said, okay, we're going to send you an Indian reservation. They said, we're going to send you to the Seminoles in Florida. I said, great, Florida, I love Florida. But let me do a little research before I say yes. So I went to the 42nd Street Library, one of the largest libraries in the United States, perhaps the world, and read about the Seminole. I discovered they live on swamps with alligators and what's that, and quicksand and mosquitoes as large as birds. So I said, no, I don't want to go to the Seminole. They said, okay, we'll call you again in a few days. And then they did. They said, we're going to send you to the Rosebud Sioux in South Dakota. I said, oh, great, the Sioux. I remember that. I used to watch a lot of cowboy movies. Yeah, I'll go work with the Sioux. Back to the library, I discovered that the Sioux are wonderful people, but it's cold there, so cold. So I said, no. Finally, they said, how about the Navajo? And I was really frightened now because I said no twice. So I thought, uh-oh, I'm going to be a Nav. But they came up with the Navajo, and I read about the Navajo, and said, yes, I will take that assignment. Navajo live on 3 states, Arizona, Utah, and Colorado, and parts of New Mexico as well. And largest reservation in the United States, over 300,000 Navajo today. And there I work with alcoholics and also some child welfare problems too. So how could a urban kid like myself be successful and work with Indians suffering from alcoholism and other problems on a remote, deserted Navajo reservation? Be honest, be truthful. And here, I applied the terms of logos, pathos, and ethos. Ethos means just be ethical, just be honest with these folks. And logos, the solutions to the problems have to make sense. And pathos means you have to have a connection with these people. Listen to them, understand them, and be attentive and respectful. It worked. We were able to do some good work with those Navajo. Tell you a very, very funny story. I had community action workers also, community workers. They were called ONEO, Navajo Office of Navajo Economic Opportunity, community alcoholism workers. And they would work with the recovering alcoholic once they left the hospital. They'd be in the hospital for 7 days, detoxify, and then go home in the community. Well, it occurred to me that the community workers should meet their clients, meet the patients in the hospital. The Indians want to do that. They said, no, this is the white man hospital. No, we're uncomfortable. So I made them badges like we had, and the badge said ONEO, Office of Navajo Economic Opportunity, CAW, Community Alcoholism Worker, Community Alcoholism Worker. So the day they all came to the hospital, I got a call from the hospital director, and he was angry. The secretary said, you better come to Dr. Patterson's office immediately. Dr. Patterson said, Richard, we have our work cut out for us with all these Navajo, and sometimes Zuni come, and so do sometimes Hopi come because they're close. Why did you invite another tribe? I said, I didn't invite another tribe. What are you talking about? He says, who are these O'Neoka? O-N-E-O-C-A-W. Anyway, when I explained to them, I was off the hook. So what I learned there is apply the principles of ethos, logos, and pathos, and you'd be successful. Next job took me to Lexington, Kentucky. What did they do in Lexington, Kentucky? At that time, Lexington, Kentucky was the largest hospital, prison slash, some people came there voluntarily, some people came involuntarily for heroin addicts. I led groups there, and I did some individual therapy there as well. What I learned there was how to not be conned. Heroin addicts are very good at being conned. I also learned how to identify a sociopath, and they're very difficult to work with. I'd like to recommend a book. Can you see this? Let's see, hold it up there. Is that it? There you go. It's The Sociopath Next Door. Is that good, Oscar? Or?
Yeah, I'm gonna put it in the comment section so they'll be able to see it.
Okay, by Martha Stout. Oh, about 8 years ago, I gave a community discussion on sociopaths. And it was about an hour and a half. And afterwards, a woman came up to me and she said, "That was wonderful, Dr. Berman." I said, "Well, thank you." She said, "You really nailed it. You really know sociopaths." That's what the focus was, an hour and a half on sociopaths. And I said, "Well, thank you, thank you, thank you." And what do you mean I nailed it? She said, "Well, you know me." And I looked at her again. I said, "No, I don't know you." She said, "No, you know me." I said, "I don't believe I do." She opened up a purse and gave me her card. Let's see. What can you see this card? Okay, what the card says, Mary Jo Buttafuoco. Does that name ring a bell to anybody?
Yeah.
Yeah, about 30 years ago, Mary Jo Buttafuoco was a housewife in Long Island, New York, and a young girl, 15-year-old girl, came to the door and said, "Are you Mrs. Buttafuoco?" And she said yes, and she shot Mary Jo Buttafuoco in the face. Her husband, Mary Jo, was having an affair with this 15-year-old girl, and she had a fantasy that Mrs. Buttafuoco was in the way, and without Mrs. Buttafuoco, she and I forget his name, Tony, I think, can have a life together. And she shot Mary Jo Buttafuoco in the face. Mary Jo Buttafuoco has had all kinds of numerous surgeries since then, has written a book about her ordeal, and she recently, about 3 months ago, in fact, I saw her on, my wife called me, it was a show called The Talk, I think, on TV, a show with women panelists. So she goes around and talks about her story and tells women how to identify sociopaths. So sociopaths are very difficult people to work with, and you'll come across some of them in your work. But most of the people you're going to work with are people who are desperate, who want help, who are sincere, who are authentic. So don't be too fearful, but just know that some rotten people are around. The next job, because of the experience in Lexington, Kentucky, again, one of the premier places to treat heroin addicts in the United States at the time. Because of that experience, I was hired by Talbot House in Cincinnati. And my job was to set up the first community treatment program for heroin addicts in Cincinnati, Ohio. And we did that.
Dr. Berman, could I ask you a question about that?
Sure.
When you were working with heroin addicts at that time, what was the number one or a popular or effective intervention that they would use to treat heroin addiction?
Methadone.
And
So
the methadone is a version of an opiate that doesn't give you the high, but is still addictive.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't crave the heroin because you're being satisfied, but again, you don't get the high.
Right.
But we also we also provided group therapy and individual therapy as well.
Mm-hmm.
Where I learned that job was that you can't just work with the individual. You've got to work with the family, and you also got to work with the community system. So we're talking about three systems, I guess. The micro system, which is the individual client, the meso system, which is the family, and the macro system, which is the community. Okay. I then went to Riverwood Community Mental Health Center in St. Joseph, Michigan. And there I, of course, I had a caseload, I saw 20 or 30 clients a week, but I also was responsible for some grant writing. And what I focused on was the fact that St. Joseph, Michigan was a twin city to Benton Harbor, Michigan, and they were divided by the St. Joseph River. Why do I say that? Because Benton Harbor was a predominantly Black community, African American, and St. Joseph was predominantly a white community. And so we talked about, the literature talks about St. Joe and Benton Harbor as being black and blue divided by blue. Black and white divided by blue, blue being the St. Joe River. The Community Mental Health Center was located in St. Joseph. And very few people from Benton Harbor would cross the bridge, of course, driving to come to the Community Mental Health Center. So they weren't being treated. They weren't being treated for family problems, mental health issues. And so I wrote a proposal, and with that proposal, we were able to put a satellite clinic into Benton Harbor. What I learned with that job was that there are two types of accessibility problems. There's psychological accessibility problems. Oh, I don't want to go see a psychiatrist. I don't want to see a psychologist, social worker. What are they going to say? They're going to, I'm too embarrassed. But there's also geographical accessibility. You have to put services where people are. I think that's something all of you can relate to. The next job was, I think, the highlight of my profession. I took over the directorship of a county community mental health services in Lapeer, Michigan. Why do I say it was the highlight of my profession? Because of my career, because when I took the job, we had a staff of about 8, an annual budget of about $400,000 and about 2,000 square feet. I grew that program to a budget of $12 million a year from 400,000, staff of 8 to 120. And from a 2,000 square feet, we were able to build our own facility, 40,000 square feet building. So I'm very proud of what we did there, because we're able to see, instead of seeing several dozen people a week, we were able to see several hundred people a week. I learned at that job that, when I took that job, I said, great, I'm gonna be my own boss. No, wherever you go, you're gonna have a boss. In addition to my board of directors, I had the county board of directors, I had the State Department of Mental Health, I had accreditation organizations. You have to be accredited if you want to get insurance money. And insurance companies were my boss too, because we had to satisfy them to be reimbursed. So I had more bosses than I could think of. Oh, and then when I came home, I had another boss too. Who's married? I am. No, she's not my boss. We have a wonderful relationship. Love her. Okay, so then when I came to Nevada, I came here to retire. And I went to the School of Social Work and I said, look, I've taught about, by the way, I should mention, as of this moment, I have instructed 152 college courses. So many of them were in Michigan in the evening, after my full-time job, whatever that might have been. So with that kind of experience, I came in to retire. I thought, well, maybe I'll teach a course in the evening. So I went to the School of Social Work and I ended up with a full-time job. So my retirement was 2 days. So I taught for the School of Social Work full-time for 3 years. And then I went to the department. In fact, I think I'm the only UNLV professor who has instructed at 4 different departments. There was the School of Social Work, and then there was a department called Community Counseling and Marital Therapy. That was the name. So I worked for them for a year or 2. And then that department split. And I instructed for the Department of Marital Therapy, which became by itself, and then I instructed for the Department of Counselor Education. But I learned in those particular situations that human service workers, whether they be psychologists, counselors, social workers, they all share the same desire to be helpful, to help to make people's lives easier, more comfortable. The degree really doesn't matter uh, as long as the objective is to be helpful. Well, I guess the degree does matter if you want to get a license at one point in time. I learned that client focus is very important. Well, let me back up. When I was working with clients, we practice what's called client-centered treatment. The client is the center. That's the reason for your being there. And the client has to be involved in the treatment plan. And the client has to be involved, and you have to engage the client. Well, that same principle can be applied in education. From client-centered therapy to student-centered education. In student-centered education, you don't assign term papers to meet your needs. You ask students what kind of term papers they want to write. Students can also develop their own learning objectives and ways of meeting those objectives. And you have to be flexible with students. Just as Oscar's flexible with you, because I know you're all coming from all parts of Nevada, and you all have different needs and different learning goals. Again, it astounds me. I'm just flabbergasted that you're pursuing this education the way you are. Again, I contrast it to Las Vegas. At any given time, there's several hundred, if not 1,000 or more, maybe 2,000 courses available in UNLV. And I know that the pickings are slim where you are, and sometimes a course is available, but you're not ready to take that class. You have to take a prerequisite, and yet somehow you do it. Again, it's very admirable what you're all doing. And continue with that drive, and I think you're going to be fabulous human service workers. Okay, that's the jobs I've had. I've got other points I can discuss with you, but does anybody have any questions about those particular positions?
So as the questions come in from the panel chat area, I'll read them to you, Dr. Berman, then we can discuss them openly.
Okay.
So at this time, if you have any questions for Dr. Berman about his experience, or maybe subject matters that you're studying now and how they relate to his experience, his education, his training, now's the time. So we got about 18 participants, including you and me. So I'm sure we'll get some good questions in.
Okay. Well, for those who are not writing questions down, other ways you can learn is by watching movies with mental health themes. If you haven't seen the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, you should.
I think in my graduate program, Dr. Berman's class, which I was in, we watched On Golden Pond.
On Golden Pond, that's another good one, yes.
I remember really that being kind of a moving experience on understanding the process of therapy and its benefits, and how, sometimes it's not apparent what people need to heal, because it's kind of a subtle process and emotions are very complex. And that was a really telling tale. So we have a question from Jackie. What do you believe has been the most influential shift in mental health counseling since you've started in the field?
Probably long-term distance therapy.
Okay, so telehealth, what we're doing right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Telemedicine and that advent. And it's one thing that makes our classes possible, and having a rural education system that meets the needs of those communities.
Yeah.
Great. Next question is from Natalie. What is your opinion of methadone treatment? Do you think it's a good option for the treatment of opioid addiction?
Yes. It saves lives. Once a person is on methadone, then you could begin to wean them off methadone. Mm-hmm. Some individuals may have to be on methadone for the life, but that's very rare. Mm-hmm. But methadone alone is not going to work. You need to provide counseling along with methadone.
In my experience working with methadone and Suboxone, there's a taper, they should be used in short-term care. You can do detox with methadone and Suboxone. And what I found is that people who stay on methadone or Suboxone eventually become disabled psychologically or physically, because there are negative effects of the medication, even though it's not as dangerous as heroin. There are, you lose a lot of mental focus, kind of your will and drive diminish. So I see a lot of people drop out of the workforce and eventually become disabled.
That's where the counseling needs to intervene.
Right.
The counsel has to be aware of those particular risks and anticipate them and prevent them. But any medication, whether it be for a mental illness or for a physical illness, has side effects, and unfortunately, there's some side effects to methadone as well.
Okay, so we're getting a lot of questions there. I'll try to get them all in.
Great. Hey.
This is from April, I believe. What do you feel may still need to be addressed within the mental health field? That's a big question.
We have to educate more therapists. We don't have enough therapists. There's waiting lists wherever you go. What Nevada needs is low-cost mental health services. In other states, particularly in the Midwest, and of course on both coasts, you have services based on ability to pay. The larger the family, the smaller the income, the lower the fee, to $2 an hour. Nevada doesn't have that.
Mm-hmm.
I think we may have one or two facilities where it's income-based services, but we need much, much more in Nevada.
Okay, we've got another question from Madison. Was it difficult entering the field of mental health when it was extremely stigmatized? So people not wanting to access services because of the...
Yeah, I don't think the field is stigmatized. I think mental health patients are stigmatized, but that's becoming less and less of a problem as celebrities reveal their mental health issues and their emotional problems. It's becoming more and more normalized. I think hopefully we're becoming progressive enough that we're recognizing mental illness as another illness. Why discriminate against mental illness when we don't discriminate against people with suffering from asthma or people suffering from diabetes? By the way, did you hear me say people suffering from diabetes? I didn't say diabetics, and I didn't say asthmatics, because a person is much more than their illness, is much more than their disability. We call that person's first definitions. So you don't say a diabetic, you say a person suffering from diabetes. You don't say a mental health patient, you say a person suffering from mental illness. That humanizes them a bit more.
That's a really important distinction. And the first part of dehumanizing people is giving them names. And I'm sure we all know this from lots of different examples throughout history. And when we start calling them something other than something that's respectful and humanizing, that's the first sign of real trouble, of marginalizing people.
Yes.
There's another question here from Jackie. You talked about treating a client in the micro, meso, and macro systems. What are some tactics you use if you cannot engage a meso or macro system to help a client?
Wow.
A big question, yeah.
Yeah. I think I write a book on that. Let's see. How do you deal how do you help an individual when the family refuses to become involved and then no community services? Is that basically the question? Okay. Well, what do they say? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. Mm-hmm. Persistence. You have to continue. Don't give up. Don't make demands on the family. Involve the family. Ask for their help. Don't give them help. Ask for their help. Ask them their perspective of what's going on. Tell them you're trying to understand their family member better. And you just spend an hour or so a week with them, but the family spends all time with them. Tell us what you're dealing with. We think that by helping your family member, you will be helped as well. So we want to help everybody. Just make that your appeal, that you want to involve them. You don't want to dictate to them. You want to hear from them. Community resources, that's a toughie. If they're not available, they're not available. But there are certain services that can be received through the internet. Support groups can. Maybe if community services aren't available, support groups can be developed in the community. The Alcoholics Anonymous model has been applied to so many. There's Gamblers Anonymous, there's Emotions Anonymous, there's Overeaters Anonymous. The list goes on and on. I think there must be 50 or 60 anonymous groups now based on Alcoholics Anonymous. So if there are no community services available, there's nothing in the macro, maybe you can help your client develop a support group where they live.
Okay, we've got another question from Kim. Kim says, you mentioned that while at Talbert House and setting up the treatment houses there, you learned that client, family, and community needed to be involved. Were you able to write those services into the program as it was being set up, or was that an aspect that had to be changed later on?
You remembered, the student remembered Talbert House. I mentioned that once, and you remembered the name of the agency. That's fabulous. The original proposal was to treat heroin addicts and also to do community outreach by speaking to various groups in the community. Fraternal groups, church groups, educational groups. When I left, my recommendation was to take that a step further and also to develop alliances and co-ops among other social agencies and churches and fraternal groups to work together. But when I was there, the only work we did was by making educational presentations to them. Interesting story, since talking about Talbert House, I was working with Sam J. Sam J. And I knew that Sam J. was using, but we did urine surveillance. It was called a process of thin layer chromatography. You take a urine specimen from the individual, you put it in a foam box and send it to the laboratory, and within 24 hours, you get a report if there's heroin in their body or not. Well, I knew Sam was using because I saw him breaking, things weren't right, and I was trying to intervene and trying to counsel, but Sam was not with it. But his urine samples kept on coming back clean. Finally, one day, he handed me his urine specimen. They'd go in the bathroom, and I'd be waiting outside the bathroom. This Talbot House was in a former rectory, a church rectory, and it was a large home with 10 bedrooms or so, and so bathrooms were just like the bathrooms in your home. So I'd wait outside. Sam came out of his bathroom and gave me his urine specimen, plastic bottle, and it occurred to me, it was cool. It had to be warm. Everyone's urine is warm. So I pushed Sam against the wall and discovered a rubber bag, an enema bag, under his shoulder with a tube leading to his groin, and he would go into a bar or have a friend urinate in the plastic bladder and use their urine. So from that day on, urine surveillance was face to face. And yes, I had some females I was working with, but I also had a female secretary, so that solved that problem.
Right. Any other questions for Dr. Berman?
I was talking about movies. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was one, and On Golden Pond is another. One that I love, I've seen it a half a dozen times, I show it to all my classes, is The Saint of Fort Washington. The Saint of Fort Washington. You watch that movie, you'll say, thanks, Dr. Berman. Two other movies would be Bug, B-U-G, and Girl Interrupted. But you're going to watch movies anyway, why not watch them and be educated? Any other questions, Oscar?
Let's see. Well, we're getting a lot of thank yous, and a lot of people are really appreciating your comments. And Tricia said this is the best webinar. Thank you. Thank you.
Whoa. Why is he wearing this hat? He doesn't like being bald. What happened to my hair? It all disappeared.
I did want to ask you a few questions about your personal life, and how do you keep how did you keep from burning out all these years? What kept you going in the face of overwhelming problems and need?
Yeah. Okay, Oscar. Um, I mentioned that I've instructed 152 college courses.
Mm-hmm.
How did I get involved in that? And that's a good segue to answer your question. I've been married to Rosemary for 41 years, and a wonderful marriage. I love my wife so much, and we have a wonderful life together. But before that, I was married to another woman, and I had a child from that marriage. And when we got divorced, I had the child for a while, and then she had the child. And so I had to pay child support. And then when I married Rosemary and we started having children of our own, it occurred to me that the money I was sending to my former wife, which she deserved, she had to take care of our child, I was stealing from my current family. Why should they suffer? So that's when I became involved in teaching. I would teach in the evening, and whatever money I earned from teaching, that went to the other family. So that's how I solved that particular enigma. But so that was a lot of work. Well, some people say that it doesn't matter how much time you spend with your family as long as it's quality time. I disagree. I think quantity and quality, you need both. Weekends, I would spend with my family. And of course, when I left the clinic or wherever I was working, I would leave all that work behind. Sometimes I would arrive home and I'd still be upset or concerned or figuring out an issue with a client or the board of directors, and drive the car into the garage. And rather than leave the car and then go into the home, I'd sit in my car for a few minutes. And my job was to leave my job in the car. Don't bring it into the house. Don't bring those worries and anxieties and troubles and problems, crises into the house. Leave them in the car. Sometimes I'd even get out of the car and walk around the car for a few minutes. But another way that you can resolve that dilemma is making sure whatever paperwork you have to do is left at the clinic. You may have some mothers in your group or some fathers in your group, so you know that when you toilet train a child, the job is not over until the paperwork's done, right? Well, the same thing is true in our job. There's always paperwork, always. No matter where you go, there's paperwork. I made a commitment that when I left the clinic every day, or the agency every day, whatever paperwork had to be done was done. So I have a clear mind. I wouldn't be concerned that I know that was done. That's another reason I could leave everything at the office and not bring it home. I'll tell you about another job I had when I worked at the clinic that I developed in Lapeer, Michigan. One of my saddest things was I could not work with clients because there was always crises and things to deal with as an executive. So I wasn't working with clients. So I found a small job in a town nearby. You've heard of this town, Flint, Michigan. Yeah, that's where the water crisis was. Lapeer was about 20 miles east of Flint, Michigan. So I worked for a psychiatrist, UCER Psychiatric Clinic, UCER, psychiatric clinic there. And he had about 12 or 15 of us, and we're all part-timers. It was all an evening job. I worked 1 or 2 nights a week there. And Blue Cross came and did an audit. And when they left, Dr. UCER called all of us a Saturday morning meeting, very unusual. And he said, look at this. Blue Cross wants $36,000. He showed us his audit bill, wants $36,000 back from this clinic. I said, why? He said, because they couldn't find documentation for services, treatment sessions billed to them. So everyone, from this day on, I would take $5 from he gave us, I think, 40 to 60% of what we brought in. I got 60% because I knew how to negotiate. I brought some experience. Some of us got 40, 45, 50, up to 60%. So I got 60%, and everyone said, okay, well, $5 every earnings that we make. And when the meeting was over, there were just 2 people in the meeting, and it was Dr. UCER, the director of the clinic, and myself. He said, Richard, can I help you? I said, yes. I said, Dr. UCER, that $36,000 bill, did my name appear anywhere on those 8 pages? He said, you're the only one that didn't. I said, yes. So then why should I be having to pay $5 every session for the mistakes and the errors that the other folks did. He says, well, that's the way it is. Everyone has to pay $5. So I tried to reason with him for the next 30 minutes or so, and he wouldn't budge. He says, everyone has to pay $5. You know what I did? I quit. But I didn't quit on the spot. No, you don't do that. I had clients in the middle of treatment. I gave them a 1 month notice, and during that 1 month, I was able to close some cases and prepare other clients who I couldn't close, who still needed treatment, prepared them for transition to a new therapist.
Okay, we have a few more questions. Can you elaborate on your interactions with mandated clients or clients who do not want to engage in treatment? How can you,
Yeah, that's another good question. Mandated clients would have to spend an hour a week with me, and I would tell them, look at my desk. If they were resistant, I'd say, fine, you could just sit there, but I have all this work to do, all this paperwork to do, and you're meeting your obligation by spending an hour with me. I'm meeting my obligation by spending an hour with you. If you just want to sit there, that's fine. I'll do my paperwork. Well, most of them, after a month or 6 weeks of this, most of them will say, maybe we could talk about my girlfriend, or maybe we could talk about my job, and that's how I would ease into that. Others, I would just have to be persistent and say, look, I know that I've read your rap sheet. I know that you got all kinds of problems. You keep on getting in trouble. Let's figure a way to avoid you getting in trouble in the future. Let's talk about non-threatening things first, and talk about those non-threatening things for several weeks until the individual begins to trust you, and then you can talk about more important, more critical issues in their life. It doesn't work with everybody, but many it does.
Yeah, so I'm hearing like not pressure, not directing, but being open, available, and I guess, yeah.
Patient, yes.
Patient, yeah. Okay. So we've got another question. What do you believe is the key to helping individuals struggling with addiction in terms of long-term recovery?
Well, I think you could divide addicts into all kinds of categories, but the two basic categories are those who became addicts because of a physical problem. They suffered a physical injury and were given opiates and became hooked on the opiates, and then when they couldn't afford them anymore, they got them on the street. And the others were just who didn't have a physical injury, just began using drugs, and so, okay. So, those two groups, what was the question again?
The key to helping individuals struggling with addiction in terms of long-term recovery.
Okay. I had an answer for that and it eluded me. I was talking about two different types of groups. Okay. All right. They each have to be approached differently. Oh, I know where I was going with that. The first group, or the second group, the group that didn't have the physical problems that led to the addiction. You may disagree with me, Oscar, but I think most of those people who became addicts without first having a physical or medical problem, I see many of them as inadequate people. Going through life is of course we have wonderful triumphs. We all have challenges and crises. Is not easy. Many addicts that I work with, I simply viewed as inadequate people. If they're addicted to a drug, they don't have to pay bills. They don't have to put gas in their car. They don't have to show up at social events that the family are having. They're excused. They're pardoned. Oh, he's an addict. He's a junkie. So the way you treat those types of people by helping them gain strength, helping them navigate the intricacies of life, helping them learn. You don't do this, but you refer them to other folks who can help them learn how to do a budget, how to manage a cash check register. You also have to teach them how to deal with the issues of daily living, how to keep an apartment clean, how to maintain a vehicle, basic issues like that.
Mm-hmm.
But the other folks who became addicts because of medical issues, You have to work with the physician and just keep on helping them wean off those drugs. At the same time, both groups, you need to be supportive. You need to be
And if I could offer a little my own opinion, I agree when Dr. Berman says inadequate people. One of the things that I've noticed is that human beings go through an inevitable psychological development, but not all, just like births will go through trimesters, and some births are aborted naturally because of the fetus not being healthy. You can actually abort developmental cycles in a organism, and so some people's psyches will remain in a childlike or adolescent state throughout their lifetime. So when they're faced with the inevitable stress and struggles of the responsibility of family, work, supporting the society, they recoil. They reject the responsibility. And one way to do that is to maintain the kind of attitude that you do in adolescence, which is one of dependency. So children are dependent upon caregivers, the society, the community, and you can actually maintain that psychological attitude. So a lot of times when I'm working with addicts and they get some sobriety, they will come to me and say, why am I so immature? Why do I react to stress the way I did when I was 14? I said, well, when did you start using? When I was 14. I said, you've been missing out on those kind of lessons and the pain that helps you grow into an adult psychologically have need time to develop, and you'll get there and it'll go faster. But it was always very endearing for me to see them come to their own realization, because I didn't want to give it to them. I wanted them to come to it and learn and grow from it. And so, of course, there's different types of addiction that can be spurred by systemic abuse, marginalization, exploitation, all kinds of things. This severe trauma that can cause people to want to reject a lot of memories and experiences they had. Of course, who would want to live with that? So we have to help them process that. And when they process out of that, many cases, they're much stronger than they were than before the trauma happened. So in a lot of ways, I don't know if that's an ideal way to help people grow, but it does offer them some real, those scars really produce some tremendous resiliency.
You're talking about arrested development, being locked in at an early stage of development. And you also mentioned how they come to realization that, hey, this is my issue, or that's my problem. How come I locked into being a 14-year-old? And I love the fact that you don't bring that information to them, Oscar, that you wait for them. You lead them to that conclusion by themselves. You know what we call that in Gestalt therapy. We call that the aha moment. The aha moment. And when we see clients, patients experiencing the aha moment, we know we've been successful.
So there's a question from Hannah. This is, do you think that someone chooses to be an addict? I don't think anybody chooses.
No.
I think sometimes, well, definitely the way and she goes on to say, even though we know that science is backed by stating it's a dependency within their brain, yes, the neurochemicals become dependent and used to the bioavailability of these substances, which mimic and or manipulate certain neural pathways and neural connectivity. But in the absence of that, people can reach a level of homeostasis where their brain takes over. Now, when you take somebody like a child that's been using since they were 8 years old, or has been diagnosed with ADHD and has given medication that is very similar to methamphetamines, the system grows like a lattice, like an ivy tree might grow around a lattice. It grows and develops around that drug. So this is a very different etymology of the disorder, but a lot of the treatment is very similar. So a lot of the interventions are still going to be the same. Sometimes it's kind of like cancer. People get cancer for all kinds of reasons, but the treatment is very similar. even different kinds of mental illnesses, people become depressed, anxious, addicted, what have you, OCD. But a lot of the interventions are you can tailor to mitigate the symptoms of that mental disorder. I hope that answers your question, Hannah. And if you'd like to add to that, Dr. Berman.
I think you covered it very well.
Okay.
Yes.
Tricia had commented this is similar to neuroplasticity. I think she means to say that we can change, we can stretch certain aspects of our mental functioning and our brain functioning to meet the needs of different areas of functioning.
Yeah, you hear some mental health professionals talk about the brain as being plastic, that it can absorb trauma and it can meet challenges, and yeah, the brain is kind of malleable in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any other questions for Dr. Berman? This has been such a great, lively discussion. The time just flew for me. Hannah said thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah.
Okay.
So please, whatever job you have, don't leave your office, don't leave your agency until the paperwork that's required for that day is done. And then you'll have a clear going evening. We didn't discuss self-care. Have you discussed that in any of your previous?
I don't, yeah, I would appreciate if you would, please.
Well, okay, self-care. We can't help others unless we're taking care of ourselves. Human services is a wonderful, rewarding field, but it's also very challenging, and for some people it's debilitating. I've known some people who have to drop out because they absorb all the emotional pain that the clients take on. But self-care is very important, and I think your students are bright enough to know about how to take care of themselves. Make sure you get at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep a day. Eat right. Try to stay away from fast food. Have a social network. Treat yourself to an ice cream sundae once in a while, or to what women do, bubble bath. My wife doesn't do that, but some women do that. Or candles. My wife sometimes with candles in the bathtub. Not in the bathtub, but around the bathtub. Just take care of yourself. Go for a drive in the country sometime. Self-care is very important. You can't be effective with others unless you are psychologically and physically healthy yourself.
Yeah, and another thing I'd like to talk about self-care is that sometimes agencies can be unhealthy in themselves and demand more of you than is reasonable. And you have to know when to put healthy boundaries in place and say, you know, I can only work this much, because more than that is going to make you sick. And you will get sick. You might be able to deal with the stress for a while, but then you'll notice physical symptoms. You'll start to get sick more often. You'll have chronic pain. You might start abusing alcohol or using it to cope on, even if it's just the weekend and you're binge drinking. I sang a lot of people in my cohort dropped out. There's not very many of us practicing still. You really have to find a way to balance your life and hold to it like it's your life support system, because it is. And also, like Dr. Berman said, have a support system, because your own inevitable life circumstances will wane and wax. You will have success and you will have loss and grief and marriage and children and death and divorce and the like. And so if you don't have a system in place to help you deal with those shocks and things, it's going to tear you apart. And then you're going to have a hard time keeping it together at work and being focused on your clients. You're going to be overwhelmed by your own situation.
Yeah, so if we have a physical illness, we'll take a day off from work. Why not take a mental health day off once in a while?
Sure.
If things are just piling on your shoulders, and the strain is so much, and you're dealing with so many emotional issues and burdens at work and at the family, take a mental health day off once in a while and just regroup and take care of yourself.
I have a few more questions here. A lot of very positive comments, a very interesting discussion. When you're dealing with someone who's using methadone, is there a specific time that they should be using it before they become addicted to it? I don't understand that question, but maybe.
Yeah, and it's been many, many years since I worked with methadone addicts, so I don't know if I can be as helpful as you would like me to be about that.
Well, I would say that if the individual's been using heroin or some kind of opiates and is using the methadone in order to wean off or at least
Okay.
be on a safer level, they're already addicted to opiates, and methadone is a form of opiates. It's just modified so they don't get the high, so people tend not to abuse it. But you'll see people abusing it, and they'll be mixing it with street drugs too. This is a lot of times what happens when addicts leave, or people that are addicted to heroin leave a treatment agency, like let's say they're in residential care, they'll have methadone in their system. They'll go out and dose with street drugs and they'll overdose. And so their respiratory system will fail. They stop breathing, their heart stops beating. And this is where you see people die from these kinds of things. Also, if they haven't used heroin in a while, their tolerance has been reduced dramatically, and they use the same dose that they did when they're actively using, and that kills them. So there's a lot of, kind of the way the body processes heroin and the nervous system reacts to it that has a lot to do with these kinds of complications. So, go ahead, Dr. Berman, sorry.
I could see some clients say, I'm not going to use methadone because that's synthetic. I'm going to stick with heroin because that's natural. Kind of funny. Yeah.
I have another question. Do you ever use group therapy in your practices? And if so, what do you think about allowing tension or creating tension in the group? In my practice, I don't see groups anymore, but I have seen hundreds and hundreds of groups. Tension will naturally arise. Mm-hmm. Tension, just like it does in everyday situations. So I'll watch it, I'll monitor it, I make sure the group is safe, but I'm also trying to introduce skills and tactics, and hopefully I've already introduced some of those before they get to this point, so they know how to resolve it in a way that's productive and useful and benefits the interpersonal relationships.
I'm glad you said that you will help, that they have to resolve it, because the group belongs to the group, and the group therapist, really, if he's a good group therapist, is going to do very little work. The group's going to do the work. Yeah, tension will always occur to some degree or another, but the more comfortable the group is with one another, they'll resolve it. Trust the group, they'll resolve it, they'll take care of it.
So we have some other comments. Natalie mentioned that methadone is to block the receptors, and some people actually request lower doses just to keep feeling the heroin. Yeah. So there's always people who might try to work around this system, but you know.
Yep.
I don't know whose name that is, but we touched on self-care. It's important that we don't put our needs on the back burner. I agree. That's really important.
Don't burn yourself out. That's it.
You might. Yeah. So burnout is somehow kind of, you're complicit in it, right?
Yeah.
You allow yourself to get, it's like letting yourself run out of gas.
Yeah.
Don't, stop and fuel up,
Good analogy. Yes.
If you're letting yourself run out of gas, then why are you? Are you hiding from your home life? Are you hiding from personal problems? Because some people will use work as a means of escape, just like a good addict will use drugs to escape. So that's another thing. I've seen that too, where even, you got this noble profession, but we're kind of abusing it in a sense because we're using it to, and that will create burnout in of itself too. So Rick, he asks, what if we're experiencing burnout in school? Would you like to answer that one, Dr. Berman, since I'm your professor?
Okay, be happy to. I remember at Lapeer, we had an attorney on staff part-time. She dealt with client complaints and grievances. And she was a very busy lady. She had her own legal practice in town, and she was a mother of 3 children, and she was president of some women's association. She had her hands in so many things. One day I said, Charlotte, how do you deal with, you have so many things on your plate? this is what she told me, and this is what I think you can apply as a student. She said, Richard, I deal with the most pressing, the most urgent, the most important issue first. Take care of that, so that gives me less anxiety, and then I work myself down to the least important things. Students, you're always going to have frustrations. Deal with the most important thing first. Get that term paper done so you don't have to have anxiety about it. Take care of business. If you think you're taking too many credits one semester, next semester take one less class. Know your limits. Self-care as a student as well. You need to have some fun. It's not all work in your part-time job, your full-time job, and then studies. You need to find some time to go to the movies, some time to spend time with friends, sometimes to go bowling. I understand bowling alleys don't use pin setters anymore. So, take care of yourself. And yeah, what's burnout? There's another concept in psychology we call the frustration tolerance threshold. You know what a threshold is, right?
Your limit.
You cross a threshold, you go from one room to another. Well, the frustration tolerance threshold concept indicates that some of us can deal with and accept so much more frustration before we break down, before we blow up. And some of us can't deal with as much frustration before we break down. So work at increasing your frustration tolerance threshold. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Don't volunteer for everything. And what you do volunteer, make sure you fulfill, but don't volunteer for everything. And take one less class next semester if you're feeling burnout now. Does that help?
Yeah, I think that's some good, sound advice. We've got another question from Jackie. Do you approach recovery from things such as food, self-harm, sex, etc., like you do drugs and alcohol, or are there other ways to approach recovery from other things besides substances?
Can you rephrase that, Oscar?
Yeah, so Jackie's asking, do you approach process addictions the same way you approach substance abuse or substance addictions?
You can. Yeah, you can. Those principles apply, just like Alcoholics Anonymous that principles apply to all kinds of problems in life and disorders. Yes, you could approach those kinds of problems the same way that you approach addiction problems.
So one of my specialties is problem gambling, and there's no substance there, but it is just as addicting and even in some ways more harmful. You can only do so many drugs or drink so much alcohol in one night, but you can dump $250,000 in a casino in one night. You can borrow from the casino what they call a mark, $1 million from them to gamble and walk out of there with $1 million bill and nothing to show for it. Usually if you borrow money, you use it to buy something else. But in gambling, it's just for the sake of gambling. I'm sure you guys have seen some of the studies that were done in the 80s where they would take the mouse and they put him in front of the cocaine and he would hit that button to get the cocaine till he dropped dead. Well, they did some more studies and they showed if they put some food in there or a mate or a wheel or a little maze, that a lot of those animals would stop using it if they had an alternative. In those cases where you saw maybe they were using some of those studies as anti-drug or the war on drug propaganda tools to scare people not to use them. But in reality, what we want to do is replace the addictive behavior that leaves a big hole in people's heart and their soul. But if you fill that with friends, family, people that care for them, and sometimes that has to be the group because they've injured their social network so profoundly that once those the group has supported them enough, and then they can start to reform and heal the connections they have with their family and friends and establish working relationships and take care for themselves, live on their own. That's what really helps people recover. And so at its core, it is love and compassion that heals addiction. And you can take that to the bank. And that's any drug, any food, sex, gambling, anything. That has been my experience when I open a place up in my heart for this client, I make space for them. I'm really genuinely there, present, and I'm compassionate. They get something that drug is not giving them. It's a cheap substitute. And so it takes kind of that openness and that willingness to be non-judgmental. And you don't have to be judgmental all the time. You're a human being, and we're not perfect. But in that moment, I offer them that, and they are like, I'm coming back because this is helping. And I haven't felt this in a long time or ever. So it is not a personal love. It's discompassionate. It's compassion, not individual or anything like that. But
sure. It's not romantic love. It's
right,
passionate love. Yes.
But it is just as important.
We have here in Henderson and in Las Vegas, in addition to the casinos on the Strip, we have what's called local casinos. And if you go to a local casino, particularly in the morning and the afternoon, I think 75% of the people I see there are women age 60 and above, 60 to 85 or so. What draws them there? Are they addicted to those machines? Are they gambling addicts? I think they go there because they're lonely. They're divorced or widowed, and their family is back east or in California, and they're lonely, and going to the casino gives them an opportunity to get dressed, to put a little makeup on, and to get out of the house. So I don't think those folks are addicted, but they need something else in life. They need person to person. They need to go to community centers. They need to go to senior centers. Again, I talked earlier how we're social beings. We need social contact, and I think that's what most of those elderly women in those casinos are seeking. They're seeking some kind of social engagement. And you do that in your practice by being compassionately caring for those clients, Oscar. That's extremely helpful and needed in their successful treatment.
And as you mentioned earlier, the power of the group is so much more powerful than an individual or individual therapist. That group helps heal them. And in some ways, there's I think it was Irv Yalom that said,
Irving Yalom, yes.
By the group, by the society, or they were broken, so by the group they shall be healed.
Yes.
And that's a really important lesson I learned, is that, sometimes society, the world, family hurts us, but the remedy to that is connection, and the group can help with that. A lot of times people isolate, so they get worse and worse off until we're social animals, and without that connection, we suffer more and more, and we get worse and worse.
Irving Yalom, the author that Oscar mentioned, he wrote the Bible on group therapy. So if you want to learn a little bit about group therapy, pick up any book by Irving Yalom.
Irving Yalom is still practicing today in San Francisco. I think his rates are about $800 per hour.
Yeah.
I read he's in his 80s, and I met him.
You did?
I met him in the ACA conference. I actually got a book signed by him. And yes, you're right. I got my first job in the hospital at intensive psychiatric acute unit, and I was running groups with psychotic patients, and I remember dusting off my Irv Yalom psychotherapy book and went through every chapter, and it saved me because we practiced group therapy in our graduate program, but it wasn't the same as doing it in the hospital setting. So that's a really useful book, and you can use it for any group, for any setting, and it's very applicable.
Can I tell a quick story about another famous person in our field? J.L. Moreno. J.L. Moreno is the father of a discipline called psychodrama, where patients act out, they're given different roles. One person, you be the father, you be the mother, you be the kid, you be the grandfather, you be the neighbor, and here's the issue, and they work out, it's called psychodrama. Well, when I was a graduate student, I was at an agency, and there were 25 other graduate students, and J.L. Moreno had an institute in Manhattan, the Moreno Institute, and on Saturday nights, he opened it up to the public. You could watch him work, and you could even be involved. You could be an actor in one of his psychodramas. So I found out it was a lot of money to attend the Saturday evening session. So I was given the job of calling the institute to see if we could get student discounts. So I called the institute, and the individual I spoke to said, "You're insulting J.L. Moreno. He's written 18 books, 27 articles, internationally renowned authority, and you want him to give you a discount?" So I had to back up and be apologetic. And finally he said, "Okay, we'll give you a discount. It will be 1/3 the price. Can you handle that?" I said, "Yes, we'll handle that." And I said, "Well, should I mention you when we get to the door? What's your name, sir?" He said, "J.L. Moreno." So all of us have, talk about celebrities. I don't know if your students would know Tony Curtis, the actor. You may have seen the movie Some Like It Hot.
Yeah.
He was in 122 movies.
Or from The Odd Couple, right?
No, not from The Odd
Oh,
Couple.
not Tony Curtis. That's, yeah.
Tony Randall.
Yeah.
He was the Boston Strangler and the Vikings. 122 movies and lots of TV. Well, I brought him to class because he was a neighbor here. I brought him to 2 or 3 classes. And the first class, and this is a man internationally known. I mean, stage, screen, internationally known. I brought him to class to talk about his addiction issues. He was treated at Betty Ford, and the son of his died of heroin addiction. So he talked about his addictions in class and his experiences. And the very next morning, he called me at my home and said, "Richard, how did I do? Did I do a good job? So the point I'm making is that all of us have our insecurities. And internationally acclaimed artists like Tony Curtis was insecure enough to want to be reassured that he did okay in his presentation to class. We are all insecure. Some of us to a lesser degree, some of us to a more bigger degree.
I'll give you my own personal. Somebody asked about burnout in college, and my graduate program, I was working full-time at the city as a computer technician, and I was taking Dr. Berman's classes and a host of others, plus my internship. So I'd work in the day, I'd go to classes. On the days I wasn't in classes or the weekends, I would do my internship. And I had planned a trip to Europe. And I told Dr. Berman, "Look, I'm going to Europe for 12 days. And he said, "That's fine, but if you miss the assignments or the test, then you're just going to have to face consequences." And I said, "Okay." That was the only class I got a B-, and it was Dr. Berman's class.
I don't remember that.
But it was worth it.
And we're still friends?
That's right. It was worth it. And I knew but I was so important to me. And honestly, I took my parents. We went to Europe. We went to Italy and all throughout Spain. And I never forgot that. And I was thinking, it was just, the grade didn't matter so much. It was, I could take it because I had good grades in all my other classes. I knew it wouldn't be an issue.
Yeah. And
it was just the time, and it was right. And I think sometimes we put value on grades. They don't measure your capabilities. We use them as an assessment tool as educators to make sure you know what's going on, to make sure you're competent, to make sure that you understand. But at the end of the day, it's just a letter on a transcript. And what's more important is, did you live the life and get the experience that you wanted? And so don't forget about that. I know I've got students that if they don't get every single point, they're upset. And sure, it's important to do good, but don't overdo it. Good enough is good enough.
A balanced life.
Yeah, I agree.
So now I know why you didn't bring me home a souvenir from Europe. I really forgot.
B-, yeah. I had it, but
Okay.
And I just want to say, I want to thank you, Dr. Berman. And Dr. Berman was first my professor, then my colleague, and now we've been friends for all these years. I graduated a long time ago now, but it doesn't seem that long ago to me. And the most amazing experience of being in this field is meeting people like Dr. Berman. You'll get to meet Ron Lawrence in a couple of weeks. I have a host of other friends, colleagues that I work with, that the caliber of human beings you get to work with is really a special thing. When I worked for Fortune 100 companies, big profit or city government, it wasn't the same. People who are providers and professionals in this field have a big heart. You always have friends. Dr. Berman never says no to me, and consequently, I never say no to him. But because it's all for the cause, and it's such a good life journey, and that's one of the most beautiful things that I thought I was going to do this all alone, and then what I learned is no, they're there by your side, and even when they're not there, the lessons they give you, the support, the kindness, the friendship, you always feel like they're there with you. And that has always been my experience. And I talk about Dr. Berman in my classes all the time when I lecture at guest. I was at Nevada State College. Actually, I was talking about him and coming to our classes because Nevada State College has a really great growing counseling minor program. And I was talking about our program and how we meet the needs of our students. And so it's such a great honor to have you with the students. And I could see from all the comments, they appreciate you so much as I do. And I wanted to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here today.
You're welcome. As a postscript to that, a few years ago, I live in an age-restricted community. You have to be 55 years or older to buy a home in this community. And there are 7,000 homes in this particular Sun City. A few years ago, I organized a program. We gave a lecture on depression for seniors. And then I invited 4 or 5 other former students to give a depression screening test. And Oscar was one of those. He said, sure, I'll come, Dr. Berman, be happy to help you out. And then he looked at the instrument I had, the depression screening tool I was using. He said, why don't you use this one instead? And it was better, and we used his. So Oscar's been very friendly and helpful, and I hope we continue this relationship, Oscar. You're a good man. Appreciate you, too.
Thank you. Thank you. It means a lot to me. Are there any final questions for Dr. Berman before we wrap up? Okay, guys. So before you sign off, I'm going to give you a password. The password is you'll put into the assignment text box to indicate that you were here. It's pumpkin, the word pumpkin, like Halloween pumpkin. Just put that into your assignment, and then as long as that password is in your assignment, you'll get credit for being here today. So don't share that password with anybody who wasn't here. There's only 15 attendees, and we have it recorded. We're going to this proceeding will be recorded and uploaded, and other students will be able to participate that way. April said, I admire your relationship and can only hope I find the same. You have found the same. I'm here. I'll always be at your service as long as I'm breathing and available. So thanks again, everyone. There's some really wonderful comments. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Awesome. I appreciate you guys. We'll go ahead and sign off, and then look forward to seeing you guys at the next symposium with Ron Lawrence. Thank you again, Dr. Berman, for being here.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity.
Okay. Take care.